The landscape of Rainbow Six lore has completely changed in Year 11 Season 2. Team Rainbow is now back, but in a completely different form. The team is now led by Paul Bishop, the ex-Rainbow 5 from the Rainbow Six Vegas games, and their threat is all too familiar. Yes, the Keres Legion were never defeated. From the ashes of Deimos and Phobos' defeat rises a new leader called Nyx. And following multiple agency attacks around the world as well, Rainbow is now back, but it's a completely different version of Rainbow, with the roster now completely trimmed down, with many other operatives just now back at their CTUs, no longer a part of Rainbow at all. Others are in the private sector, some have even retired, and heck, some are even missing. So let's go through every single operator and see where they are now. Firstly, beginning with, well, Rainbow themselves. So based on Dokubi's bio, we know that all of these operators went through Rainbow reselection training. And we also get an insight into the status of these operators currently. And all the ones for Rainbow are on active duty. So I won't focus on their status for Rainbow, but I will when we get to the other group. And the operatives go as follow. Firstly, Paul Bishop. Acting as Rainbow Six, we know that he is also on the field as well, as you can see from the cinematic where he faces off against Nyx. Next, we have the Strikers and Sentries. These are Rainbow's recruits, so they are expected to be something which also returns alongside the team. But again, even notice when you look at their bio, they went from being part of Rainbow Operation staff to just Rainbow. So it shows that this is a new era with a different structure under Bishop's leadership. But continuing on, we have Sledge, Ash, Montagna, Blitz, Mute, Castle, Capcan, Jaeger, Blackbeard, Hibana, Jackal, Ying, Dokubi, Lion, Sense, Brava, Ram, Raura, Kavera, Legion, Maestro, Goyo, Oryx, Thorn, and Tubarao. That is it. As it currently stands, that is Team Rainbow as of Year 11 Season 2 under Bishop's leadership. A significantly downsized roster from what we've previously seen before their deactivation, and this makes a lot of sense. They've clearly had budget cuts over the way. They're going to have still a lot more GSAC scrutiny. Of course, stuff has happened where the GSAC do believe it is seemingly worth bringing Rainbow back once again. However, it's not going to be all the operators, and these are the operators we currently have on active duty for Rainbow. Now let's move over to the private sector. Now, this is something you would typically expect to be Nighthaven. They have been a constant in the lore for so many years. Well, Nighthaven is seemingly no more. Yes, after their purchase from the GSAC, many of their operatives left Nighthaven, and even, as you'll see in this video, Kali and Wamai don't even have an org. Whatever happened with that GSAC merger with Nighthaven, I don't know if they just took all their assets and, you know, Nighthaven's now gone and Kali got a big payday, but we'll talk about some stuff in a minute. So, the main people in the private sector here is Arassas. Now, we did hear of Arassas before. This is the group led by Denari, and what we know is that Denari leads this group with a lot of freedom. Operators are free to come and go. He doesn't hold them down like what Nighthaven kinda did. And that's how we know that prior to Rainbow's reactivation, some of the operators which we now see in this newly reactivated Rainbow were in Arassas over this 2-year period of time, such as Maestro and Ying, who are now back to being Rainbow Ops under Bishop's leadership. They were a part of Arassas, and it's clear that Denari allowed them to return. Like I said, Denari doesn't lead Arassas with the same way that Kali led Nighthaven. If operators want to leave, they can leave. He gave them sanctuary for this period that Rainbow was gone, and he's allowed them to go back. However, there are still a handful of operatives, but mainly Nighthaven agents, who are now in Arassas. So, of course, Denari is Arassas' leader. We also have Smoke, who is ex-Nighthaven, Pulse, who is ex-Nighthaven, Fuse, who is ex-Rainbow, and of course, Ace and Grim, also both ex-Nighthaven. So, many of the males who are in Nighthaven are now part of Arassas, and we also have Fuse from Rainbow, who is stuck with this group. Now, I imagine Ubisoft will potentially update these bios over the seasons, and some of these operators may change. Maybe some of them may return to Rainbow, and, you know, some of them will come and go through Arassas, but as of Year 11 Season 2, that is Arassas. Now, we also have the GSAC. Yes, some operatives have joined the Global Security Alliance Council. We know that one of them was Brava during the comic book for Operation Tenfold Pursuit after Rainbow was deactivated, but now we know she's back in Rainbow itself. There are currently 4 operators, according to these bios, who are in the Global Security Alliance Council. That is Glaz, Nomad, Amaru, and Scopos. Now, Nomad, Amaru, and Scopos aren't really a surprise. We kind of knew that from Battle Pass info before, that they did join the GSAC, and technically Scopos was always a part of the GSAC. However, Glaz, that is a new one. He is a part of the Global Security Alliance Council, and I do wonder if his proximity to Kure, Scopos, is one of the reasons which caused him to join this, because of course, she was a mentor for him. So I do wonder if his proximity to Scopos did cause him to join the GSAC, and maybe they can help turn things around from the inside. Maybe that's what, you know, her plan is. She knows how well she gets on with Glaz, she knows how much he trusts her, and maybe that's what the plan of, you know, Glaz, Nomad, Amaru, and Scopos is. Or maybe they truly believe in the cause, or, you know, I don't think Scopos does, because she was always critical of the GSAC, but maybe Amaru and Nomad agree with the GSAC, for all we know. Heck, maybe Glaz does too. Now, this next squad is very interesting, because it's titled as Nighthaven Labs. Not Nighthaven, Nighthaven Labs, and there's only 2 operators in here, and that is Osa and IQ. Now, has Nighthaven Labs, like, is that broken apart? Is that a different entity to what Nighthaven is? Because we don't see any Nighthaven here anymore. Nighthaven is seemingly gone from most of the stuff we can read here, but Nighthaven Labs has a different logo, and it exists with OSA and IQ, because, you know, that was the QCR department of Nighthaven, which was ran by OSA. After the GSAC's merger, did, like, OSA break apart and, you know, start Nighthaven Labs as a separate entity, and IQ went with her as well? That's a very interesting one. I'm a bit, you know, I'm interested to see where it goes here, because I was reading this for the first time and I'm like, Nighthaven Labs? Like, that's became a separate entity now. So yeah, maybe OSA broke apart from Nighthaven when that merger happened and created Nighthaven Labs as just something separate. I don't know. Interesting. But yeah, OSA and IQ are in Nighthaven Labs. Right, we have a bit of a unique one here, and there's only one operator in here, and this is Solace, and she's a part of the ArchNet Cybersecurity Task Force. Now, we actually know a bit about this task force because in Dokubi's updated bio, it mentions that she was in good standing with the GSAC after she partook in this cybersecurity task force, and it seems like another operative that took part in this with her was Solace, but it seems like Solace has remained in ArchNet, whereas Dokubi would of course go through the Rainbow reselection training. Now, the next group is going to be Yahata Data Security, which of course is the one who kicked off the entire QCR saga to begin with. His assassination at the hands of the Keres Legion is what framed Nighthaven, and we went through that entire arc. Well, we have 2 operatives now working for Yahata Data Security. The first being Azami. This one isn't a surprise. She used to work for Yahata. She went on that entire vengeance arc against the Keres Legion to, you know, avenge his death. And we also learned that she got the call back recently, you know, around the time of their deactivation, to come work back at Yahata. But it is worth noting that she is listed as inactive. However, there's another operative who's went to Yahata Data Security, and that is Echo. Yes, Echo has went alongside Azami, and the 2 of them now work for Yahata Data Security. I found this one very interesting. Oh, and his status is also listed as inactive. Now, after we've gone through a few of those smaller groups, we now have the operators who are back at their CTUs, and these are going to be operators where we get a bit of an insight into their current status as well. So, Thatcher is now back at the SAS and he is on active duty. Buck is now back at the JTF2 on active duty. Zofia is back at the Polish Grom on active duty. Now, it says Maverick is also back at the Grimsky unit. If I'm not wrong, the Grimsky unit was something that was developed by Rainbow themselves, but I think something a bit more important here is that he is MIA. Yes, Maverick is missing in action. This isn't really out of the ordinary for Maverick. He has gone missing before, and Nokk was the one to actually find them before either any of them were in Rainbow. So it seems like he's went back to his old ways, going deep undercover, and once again, he is MIA. But if I'm not wrong, in my opinion, I think it should say that Maverick is in Delta Force rather than the Grimsky unit, because if I'm not wrong, the Grimsky unit was something that was formed on behalf of Rainbow. So that would then imply that he's back at Rainbow. I don't know if he is. So whether that's intentional or not, what we do know is that he is missing in action because he's likely on another one of his deep missions. Gridlock is back at the Australian SASR on active duty. Doc and Rook are both back at the French GIGN on active duty. It's very surprising that Doc didn't return to Rainbow or wasn't reselected, especially after being a squad leader. Tachanka is back on active duty at the Spetsnaz. Bandit is back at the German GSG-9, but he is currently on leave, giving us a bit of a different status compared to some other operators, as I just turned the page. Frost is back at the Canadian JFT2, just like Buck, on active duty. Valkyrie is back at the Navy SEALs on active duty. Vigil is back at the 707th Special Mission Battalion on active duty. Alibi is back at the GIS on active duty. Macie is back at the Australian SASR, however, he is currently on a medical discharge. I like that, just a little bit of world building there, just, you know, adds a bit of depth to these statuses. Warden is back at the Secret Service on active duty, so no President Warden it seems. Melusi is back as a private contractor at the Inkaba Task Force, so, you know, anti-poaching stuff in South Africa. Something she did prior to Rainbow and joining the program. And Thunderbird is also back at her old occupation as well, with the Starnet Aviation Group. Now, here's where stuff gets really interesting. These are the following operators who currently have no org and are inactive. So, in other words, they are retired. And it goes as follows: Thermite, Twitch, Capitao, Finca, Mira, Ayana, Flores, Ella, Clash, Aruni, and Fenrir. Yes, from what it seems, all of these operators are currently retired. We kind of saw a bit of that with Thermite and Finca in the comic book for Operation Tenfold Pursuit. We know that Thermite was living on his family's ranch, and that Finca had sort of settled down with Tachanka. Now, Tachanka has gone back to active duty with the Spetsnaz, but because of her condition, it seems that Finca has somewhat retired. Same case can kind of go over Rooney as well. Potentially her condition has caused her to retire as well. But there's a few other ops in the no org category who have different status. The first status is going to be the unknown status, and that is currently being held by Kali, Zero, Solid Snake, and Wamai. So we don't know where Kali and Wamai are. It doesn't have Nighthaven listed. Of course, Wamai is her right-hand man, and Kali was the leader of Nighthaven. So those two, who knows where they are? I imagine they're doing something with the GSAC potentially, since, I mean, they did buy Nighthaven, and she kind of got rid of all of her agents. What are Kali and Wamai up to? Now, the other two, Solid Snake and Zero, we can kind of explain what's going on there. We saw what happened with those two in Operation Silent Hunt, and we know that Snake has always kind of been a bit redacted anyway, and Zero has went off on his own, it seems, following this mission. It seems like both of these operatives are kind of went their own ways now. You know, Sam especially. Snake never even met Rainbow to begin with. He only existed in the lore for Operation Silent Hunt. That was confirmed. We knew that his story wasn't going to continue after that season as well. So he's never going to be a permanent narrative operator. He's going to be a permanent gameplay operator, but never permanent. And Zero as well, unknown, you know, is setting Sam up for his other adventures outside of Rainbow Six. And there's two more different operators I want to talk about in the no org section. The first is going to be Nokk. She is also listed as no org, however, her status is redacted, so Nokk is clearly up to something as well, even if she isn't with an org. And the final one is Kaid. Although it says he isn't with an org, it does say that he is still on active duty, which that likely means that he is just the Kaid of the fortress still. He's went back to leading the fortress, training soldiers, but he just isn't with an org. So yeah, very fitting as well that we got the fortress rework as well quite recently. So Kaid is still leading the fortress, but he is no org. But the rest of the ops who all have the inactive status are seemingly retired. You know, Thermite, Twitch, Capitao, all of that. Yeah, and we have, of course, our final operator to talk about, and it's the Keres Legion operative, Deimos. It does still say he is in the Keres Legion, however, his status is listed as in custody, because, well, he was arrested and he's still in custody even after all of these years. And so that is the updated position of all of the operatives in the lore. We have a trimmed down Rainbow led by Bishop. We have operatives working with Denari and Arassas. We have some in the GSAC. Nighthaven Labs is seemingly split away from the bigger cell of Nighthaven. Solus is in a group called ArchNet. Yahata Data Security has taken Echo and Azami to work with them. A bunch of operatives have went back to their original CTUs, many have retired, and some are just off doing their own thing. And you know what? I really like that. I felt we were kind of getting to a stage where the team had too many operators, and there was just too many to handle from a story perspective. It definitely needed to be trimmed down in my opinion, and now with these other groups as well, we can continue to introduce new operators into the game, and they don't necessarily have to be in Rainbow. We've been able to do that before with Nighthaven and the Keres Legion, but this just gives us more freedom. We have many ops who aren't even in Rainbow anymore, they just went back to their CTUs, their time in Rainbow is done. They may be called upon again once in the future, and that's fine, but as it currently stands, that is how it is. So I really like this new classification of all the operators in R6 lore, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this new era of the lore. What do you think, and where does your favorite operator currently stand? Let me know your thoughts, drop a like on this video if you did enjoy, sub if you haven't already since we're almost at 250k, and have a great rest of your day. See you in the next one.